Welcome to the North Dakota Grants Management System. From within this system, you can apply for grants and manage existing grants, including submitting status reports and requesting reimbursement. We are currently logged into the Home dashboard, where we see an overview of our existing projects for which we have applied or received a grant. Each card will contain the name of the project, for instance, test project, save the example info, efficient energy, and so on, as well as a tag containing the abbreviation indicating what program that particular project is associated with. OGRP, Oil and Gas Research Program, as well as an identifier that can be used when communicating with the North Dakota office staff. For instance, in this case, the identifier of efficient energy is 5. You'll also notice that we have each card in a specific phase of the grant lifecycle, either pre-award, award, post-award, monitor, and closeout. The pre-award phase includes all draft applications as well as applications for which you have submitted but are pending payment. The award phase includes those that have been selected to be awarded but are still awaiting contracting. And the post-awarded monitor phase includes those grants that are actively being monitored for which you are submitting status reports and requests for reimbursement. From here, we'll begin by submitting another grant application. After clicking Apply for Grant, we can select any program that is openly accepting applications. In this case, we are in a test environment, so you'll see some atypical programs. If in operations.ndic.nd.gov you see or don't see a program that you would expect, you should reach out to the North Dakota Industrial Commission office for more information. In this case, we'll choose a mock version of the Oil and Gas Research Program. If you've already submitted a grant application for this program, and by you I mean your organization or company, then you will see a warning letting you know, hey, you're waiting on some additional information. That will not prevent you from applying for the program again, or with a different project rather, but it is something to keep in mind in case you just have a miscommunication between your team. After selecting the program, we can view all the program details from within the application form. You should be sure and read through this information, especially the program procedures, in order to ensure that your project will be eligible for the program to which you are applying. When entering the basic project information, we'll enter the name and the description. And you'll be able to select a new primary contact. This may be you in the case where you should be the primary contact or you're the only person associated with that particular organization, or you have yet to be approved for a particular organization. If you do not see someone that you would expect in the primary contact dropdown, you should reach out to the Industrial Commission and make sure that you have been approved to have access to your organization's account and make sure that that person actually has an account. You'll also notice that there is some pre-filled information. This includes the application date and the grant round. The application date will default to the current date that you have something open. In this case, we see November 21st. You may see whichever date you have most recently opened the application. Ultimately, this date will be the application date with which you submit the application, not the application date that you start. This is important to note as your application date does determine the grant round that you're associated with. You also need to, of course, enter the duration in months of your project. This should be the expected duration. Then you'll be greeted with your standardized forms. From here, you have the option to download a template or any specific instructions, fill it out, and then re-upload it. You'll notice an asterisk next to any required documentation. The system will accept various document types and will give you a warning if you try to upload something that is incorrect. Out of the box, you should expect to be able to upload PDFs, Word documents, Excel, etc. Within that scope of documents that are allowed, there is the expectation that your application will be in PDF form. Additionally, for any particular grant program, there is the option to have certain application details that you will fill out within the system, in addition to any of those standard application forms. As you're filling out these details, these are going to be specific to the program to which you are applying. In this case, this is a mock oil and gas research program, so don't read too much into the specific further specifications and confidential information section here. If at any point you find that you are not prepared to answer certain information, you can always save the application as a draft and come back to it later. Here we are filling in the project budget information. This should complement what you have submitted on your actual application, where you are going to include a more descriptive budget narrative. In this case, you are going to be encountered with a couple of key validations. First and foremost, you need to enter your total project costs, which should include both your share of costs as well as that you're expecting reimbursement for. So in this case, we'll enter $200. Now, here we have a specific project budget category. In many cases, you'll only have one category. However, there is a possibility that you might have multiple categories where your cost share percentage will depend upon the category to which you are assigning certain values. So for instance, here we have a single category, but should we have had multiple categories, we would have to be mindful of the cost share percentage for each of those categories. With that said, these values will default to the preset values by the Industrial Commission. It is possible that there may be exceptions to the rule, in which case you can enter your own cost share percentage. However, it is strongly encouraged that you adhere to the cost share percentages outlined by default. And in that effort, let's go ahead and see what happens when you don't. Now you'll notice the total amount that I am requesting along with what I'm spending in my cash match share totals $200, which is the total project costs. However, I do still see this warning icon because the cost share is misaligned with what I have actually input as my requested and match share amounts. In order to correct this, I can go ahead and adjust this so that it is truly 50-50. Once I have cleared the disconnect in total between the total project costs and the amounts displayed in these specific line items, we are able to submit the form. At this stage, we'll see the terms and conditions to which I am agreeing as I apply for the Oil and Gas Research Program grant. I must check the box to acknowledge that I have read and agreed to these terms before I can submit my application. Now, Once I hit submit, I will be redirected to the payment step of the application. So it's important that you be ready to hit that payment option. When I go to pay my application fee, I will click this link, which will open in a new tab the payment information. It'll pre-populate your first and last name, and then you will be responsible for paying the application fee. In this case, $100. Once I submit this payment, I will be greeted with a confirmation screen that includes a confirmation number. I can then navigate back to my pay application fee form and enter that number. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and enter a test number so that we can move forward. Once I have submitted the application and paid the fee, I'm going to see my new submitted application appear in the pre-award section. You'll also notice that there is a $ icon, which lets me know that we are currently pending the application payment confirmation. Once the payment goes through, the payment system will send a notification to our system, and we will see that this disappears and our application will be tracked as submitted. Any draft projects will be viewable additionally in the View Draft Projects grid at the bottom of the page. From here, we can go ahead and view the specific status of the application that we just submitted. So I've clicked into Example Project for Oil, and I will see all of the general project information, including the project status that indicates it's pending the payment confirmation, as well as the financial details that I entered and the application responses. From here, I can also view my task checklist. On my task checklist, I have a series of items that relate to the movement of my application through the system. This is where I can monitor any new things that I'm going to be responsible for completing. Navigating back home, we're going to go ahead and see one of the applications that has entered that next phase of awarding. Navigating into Efficient Energy, we'll navigate back to our task checklist. From here, I'm going to be able to sign my notice of award. When you receive a notice of award, this indicates that your application has been selected to receive grant funding, and you will have the task of acknowledging that you do intend to receive that funding. In this case, we have our Efficient Energy project, the decision, the comments entered, and we're able to enter our signature. This moves our project forward in the process. Do note that all of these are test projects, so you may see some misaligned or inconsistent data or information than you would typically expect in your formally awarded projects. Once I have signed my notice of award, then the notification will go back to the Industrial Commission office staff. They will be able to review my signature and then facilitate the contracting process. This may be done in the system, in which case all receive additional tasks in this grant awarding and contract management phases, or it may be done external to the system, in which case the contract may be uploaded and we may bypass our system contract management tasks. Once a contract has been uploaded, it will be available in the Documents tab. For example, let's navigate back home and see a fully awarded project where we can actually submit status reports as well as requests for reimbursement. Here we see the Highway Repair Program and the Bridges Builder Program, both of which are in this post-award and monitor phase as active awarded grants. They are both associated with TAP, which is the Transit Authority program that is mocked in our test system. In this case, we'll navigate to Bridges Builder. Now, you may have noticed a couple of other key tabs and key parts of information on this home screen. You'll also notice in this case, the application responses reflect different types of questions because this is a different program, and each of the application responses will be program specific. Now, when I say that you may have noticed some additional tabs and additional actions available to you, this includes the program info, where you can view key information about the overarching program, in this case, our mock Transit Authority program, the budget, in which case you can view the submitted and approved budget. You can also request edits and do a couple of other things that we'll get to shortly, as well as the documents, information requests or info requests, project history, and task checklist. We just went over the task checklist where you are able to navigate through all of the assigned activities for your particular project, but this is also in complement to these other tabs. Here we'll go ahead and navigate over to our budget, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. On the project budget, you'll see what you submitted for that particular project, as well as its specific status. Even though you submit your project budget as part of your application, it may go through a number of changes throughout the awarding process. Ultimately, once the budget has been approved by the office staff and has gone through the correct approvals with regards to the advisory board as well as the industrial commission, then you'll have everything all visible here. If you do expect to make a change to your budget, this will usually be in tandem with a contract amendment. But you can always go and request an edit via the Edit Project Budget tab. Now, this will create a task for your Industrial Commission office in order to review and approve, and may result in not being able to submit for payment requests or get approved for reimbursements during that period of time. From here, we'll go ahead and log a transaction. Now, when we log a transaction, what we are doing is we are logging the expenses that we have spent on our project at this particular point in time or at an earlier point in time. We will enter the total amount for those expenses. This includes things such as donated labor, materials, travel, etc. Anything that we expect that we may have some partial reimbursement for, or that may serve as part of our cost share requirements for that particular grant. So, for example, here we'll go ahead and enter that we have $50. We'll say that we spent that back at the end of October. We'll enter a description that it was for materials to build a bridge. Then we'll associate it with a cost category. In this case, we have one single category, but again, each category will inform the cost share requirements for your particular project. In this case, we'll use our Transit Authority program project expenses. And then we have to enter some form of proof. Here you'll see invoice, receipt, or other. When we see invoice, we don't mean an invoice to the North Dakota Industrial Commission. Here we mean an invoice of services that you may have received from a particular vendor, or a receipt. So in this case, we'll go ahead and enter an invoice, and we'll just upload an example file. From here, we can go ahead and submit this transaction. Once we have entered all of the specific project expenses for a particular period of work, we can then request payment for that period of work. And that is a system that we'll demonstrate here shortly. By clicking Request Payment, we can initiate that process. You'll notice the first thing you are expected to select is a status report. This is proof of the work that you have completed, and it is associated with the period of work that you are entering your reimbursement request for. In this case, you'll notice that we have a series of status reports, which includes those that are unsubmitted, those that are approved, and if we had one in this status, those that were submitted and not yet approved. In this case, we'll select one that is unsubmitted. Notice that we can select ones that are farther in the future. However, this will still go through a human review, and the expectation is that you are submitting for the work that you have done over the most recent period of time. In this case, we are prompted to enter a specific document for our status report. In this case, I'm just going to upload a quick PDF, and at that point, we can go ahead and move on. Now, the review for the payment request and the review for the status report may happen asynchronously. Depending on the program, we may have program-specific experts that go in and review the particular status report and ensure that the work aligns with that was scoped when receiving the grant. In addition to that, we have our specific reviews of the financial information to ensure that everything is compliant. Now, we've entered the next screen where we are to select the specific transactions that are associated with the period of work that we are submitting a request for reimbursement for, or a payment request for. This is, again, equivalent to us submitting an invoice to North Dakota. So we'll go ahead and select the specific transaction that we just added into the system. We'll come back to these other transactions later. Once I've added it to the payment request, you'll see all of the transactions that are going to be associated with this period of work and this payment request here. Then for each specific budget category, we'll see this informative screen. Here it'll enter the expected match from the program and the expected match from the grantee, which is us, the total amount of transactions that we are reporting to the North Dakota Industrial Commission, and the recommended amount based on that program percentage match that we should request for reimbursement. In this case, we'll go ahead and align that here. We can also see any previous reimbursement requests that were approved here in the below grid. You'll also notice that we currently have 0% utilization for each of our respective items that include those that have actually been processed and those that have been paid. Once I complete the payment request and submit it, it will have to go through a series of approvals. At this stage, the Industrial Commission will review the payment request and ensure that it adheres to the requirements of the program, that the proof is sufficient and that the request amount is in alignment with the cost share. As this goes through its processing, it will then get redirected through the series of approvals over to the payment system and ultimately to us as the grantee, assuming it is approved. But what happens if it's not approved? This brings us to another key tab that you're going to see on this screen. Here we have the info request or information requests that allow us to resolve specific issues or specific things that come up during the process of completing any particular task. So in this case, we have this task 1797, which is related to the review payment request. So here, a member of the office staff has come in and reviewed our payment request and has observed that there is a documentation issue with transaction 221. Here, we need to go ahead and update that so that it properly shows proof of the request so that our previous payment request can also be approved. With that, we'll go ahead back to our budget tab. Do note that when you receive an information request, you will get a notification. As we navigate back to the budget tab, we'll be able to view all of the transactions, payment requests, budget, cost shares, etc. So from here, we're going to go ahead and scroll down on this screen and we'll see two key grids, the payment requests and the grant payments grid. Now the grant payments grid is going to have the actual reimbursements that we are expecting. In this case, we have a $25 reimbursement and a $35,000 reimbursement. This is the one that was most recently rejected, as you can see by the status. However, this is not the actual transaction that was called into question in our information request. In order to get to the individual transaction, we can either navigate to project transactions or we can navigate through our payment request to the specific set of transactions. In this case, we'll go the swifter route by clicking on project transactions. If you recall, we said transaction 221 did not include the correct documentation. So we can go ahead and click on transaction 221, which is our $50,000 transaction. Here, you'll notice that this is not associated with a particular payment request because the payment request with which it was submitted was rejected, and thus it is no longer an active payment request. From here, to resolve the issue with the documentation, we can click to edit our transaction. This is the transaction that we entered that identified $50,000 for material costs. Here you'll notice that I uploaded the file research proposal example, which perhaps was the wrong file. So here I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and I'm going to upload a new file. We'll go ahead and upload example service invoice, open that, and resubmit. Now this will not resubmit the whole request for reimbursement. Instead, this will just correct the documentation for the particular transaction. Depending on the circumstances of the rejection, you may need to simply resubmit a new payment request, or submit for the first time rather, or you may need to actually edit a particular transaction. The office staff will indicate exactly what needs to be done depending on the circumstances. So from here, now that we've fixed that particular item, and we can refresh the screen to see the new documentation appear. Now we see the example service invoice. And then from here, we'll go ahead and navigate back to our Bridges Builder application. In this case, I happen to have it open in this other tab. And from here, we're going to go ahead and request payment once again. And in this case, we'll correct the items that we requested previously. So we can do our new approved payment request, approved status report, not payment request. It's very important to keep the distinction alive. And we'll go ahead and upload these 3 transactions. Beautiful. And now we can go ahead and once again request that $35,000, and we can submit this payment request. Now, this is showing the cumulative cost share by status per category. So we have one cost category and we have our one specific status, which is those that have been entered into the payment request and then those that have been rejected. We have our budget spending per category and we have our spending by transaction type. From here, we can see that they're both payment requested. Now, once the office staff approves a particular payment, this will go to our payment system and may take a number of days to process. There are a couple of other key tabs that I'd like to draw your attention to before we close out this training session. First of all, you have your Documents tab. From here, you can go ahead and upload any additionally needed documents to your specific project if they are not associated with a specific task. You'll also notice that you have any standardized forms that were uploaded during your application process, as well as any contracts and contract amendments. You'll also notice you have your project history, which will have a key and up-to-date version of all your activities within this particular project, including those that are taken by you and the office staff regarding the grant project. You'll also be able to add a project comment here. These will be visible to the office and are simply to act as notes to yourself or to the office in case the record is needed. If, however, you need a specific piece of information from the office staff, then you ought to go through your information requests. In this case, because we corrected and resubmitted this particular status report, payment request and transaction, we're going to go ahead and respond to this info request and let the office know that we've corrected the issue. The reason to use an information request as opposed to a comment for this particular type of activity is because an information request is going to include a status. In this case, you'll notice that it says open. Once the office staff has identified a particular open issue as closed, they will be able to update the status of that information request to reflect that particular answer and information. You also can associate each of your information requests with specific tasks as you move through the system. Here we'll go over to our task checklist and we'll see a more complete version of the checklist than we saw on our earlier application that we were simply awarding for the first time. Once a task checklist has been set up for an active application, an active grant program that has been awarded as an application, then you're going to see a series of status reports that identify with the specific contractor information. You'll also notice that this has paging, and you are going to have a couple of items potentially appear on those next pages. With that said, you will see each of these items appear in the order of the date that they are expected, and you will see items that are actionable as well as those that are not. It's important to note that you can see how many open information requests are associated with a particular activity. If you scroll down on the page, you'll see the completed activities that are associated with earlier phases of the project. Wonderful. In addition to this, if you need to view your tasks across different projects because you are managing multiple grants, then you can go into the tasks dashboard and you'll see a consolidated view of everything. You'll also be able to scroll over to the right and take actions on those that are actionable for you at that particular point in time. From here, you can also review your requests and comments, and you can navigate specifically to your applications and your projects, i.e. those that have not yet been awarded and those that have already been awarded. Finally, if you need additional support, you're going to see a number of frequently asked questions, which is likely where you're viewing this video, and a specific grants email that you can email for any additional questions on top of and including those that you would be answering here. Thanks so much for watching, and happy granting.